The CEO got caught on Ring camera with the assistant. The stay-at-home mom used the prenup and started over. He was the man I built my whole life around, and it was my own Ring camera that exposed him. If you find value in real stories told with clarity and truth, make sure to subscribe to Left Woman Loud to never miss one. That night, she hadn't planned to check the camera. She only wanted to see if the Amazon package dropped off earlier was still on the porch. Her phone buzzed with a notification motion detected 11:47 p.m. She tapped it. The feed lit up. The front door swung open, the porch light painting the scene in pale yellow. A tall man stepped in, still in his tailored suit. Her husband. But the figure that followed froze her lungs. A younger woman, office dress, hugging her frame hair neatly loose. The assistant. She held her breath. It wasn't a passionate embrace. Not yet. But it was intimacy, his hand brushing the small of her back, her quiet laugh. And then the unmistakable gesture, his finger pressed gently to the woman's lips, as if to say, "Shh, don't let anyone know." Only someone had seen. The Ring camera. The unblinking witness that never slept. Tears stung her eyes, phone shaking in her grip. Memories knifed their way through the present nights in the MBA library when she worked double shifts just to bring him coffee. Sleepless months when his startup collapsed, her selling her wedding band to pay his staff. Days she put her own career on ice to raise the kids while he built something bigger. She had told herself his endless meetings, late nights, and trips were sacrifices for their family. But the footage whispered the truth. The sacrifices were only hers. She rewound the clip, played it again and again. Maybe it was work, she whispered, desperate. Maybe they were just planning. But the touch, the laugh, they told a different story. The evidence was silent but merciless. She asked herself the question that shattered her. Had I been naive this whole time? She didn't sleep. She sat in the dark kitchen, the refrigerator hum filling the silence, her eyes locked on the frozen image of betrayal. What would she say if she confronted him? He would deny. If she left, what would she live on? She hadn't worked in years. And the children, what would this do to them? Her mind spiraled until another memory surfaced, the prenup. That thin document she'd signed long ago, back when she thought forever meant forever. The one she resented then. The one that suddenly glowed in her memory like a lifeline. At 4 a.m., she was still there. Body stiff, phone on the table screen paused. Her husband smirking in the frame. The assistant smiling like a secret she could keep. She whispered to herself, "There's no way back from this." She hadn't spoken it aloud, hadn't confronted him yet. But she already knew the marriage was dead. The only question left was how she would bury it. What she didn't know was that the Ring footage wouldn't stay locked on her phone. It would soon become evidence in a divorce war that would cost him everything. The world thought they were perfect. Neighbors saw the manicured lawn, the black SUV in the driveway, the kids in pressed uniforms. Friends saw the vacation photos, beaches, birthday cakes, anniversary toasts. Her parents bragged, "Our daughter married a man who takes care of her." But appearances are like wallpaper, glossy, easy to clean, and good at covering cracks. Inside the mansion, the air felt different, colder. She remembered when things were simpler. A one-bedroom apartment with a leaking radiator. Him hunched over textbooks, drowning in MBA debt. Her working cafe shift, sliding him coffee refills and whispered encouragements. When he launched his first startup, she stapled pitch decks in their kitchen, typing emails between diaper changes. He promised, "When this works, you'll never have to worry again." She believed him. She wanted to believe. And then impossibly, it did work. The second startup landed funding. The board named him CEO. Suddenly, there were driver pickups, investor dinners, a corner office overlooking the skyline. He wore tailored suits now. The man who once scrubbed ramen pots beside her ordered room service in Tokyo hotels. She watched from the sidelines, carpool lines, PTA meetings, grocery lists. Her own world shrank as his expanded. At first, she told herself it was normal. CEOs are busy. CEOs work late. CEOs travel. But gradually, it wasn't just work. It was the way his phone never left his hand. The way he brushed off her questions with a tired smile. The way he smelled faintly of perfume that wasn't hers. Still, she defended him when friends whispered. "He's under pressure," she said. "He's doing it all for us." Even as she ate dinners alone, scrolling through social media to see photos of him smiling at events she wasn't invited to. Their conversations shrank. At breakfast, he scanned emails while she packed lunches. At night, he fell asleep with the glow of his laptop on his face. The only words left were logistical soccer practice at 4, board meeting at 9. Don't forget milk. The intimacy drained so slowly she almost didn't notice until it was gone. She looked in the mirror one morning, toothbrush in hand, hair tied back. When had she stopped wearing lipstick? When had she stopped dreaming of anything beyond the walls of this house? She had become the background character in her own life. And yet when the neighbors waved or when her parents bragged, she smiled and nodded. Because the facade was easier than the truth. The very home he had built to show success, the smart locks, the cameras, the alarms, was what finally tore the mask away. The Ring camera didn't care about facades. It only recorded reality. She replayed the clip again, staring at the strangers her marriage had turned them into. He the CEO with a secret. She the wife with evidence in her pocket. And for the first time she whispered something she never thought she'd say. Maybe the prenup was the smartest thing I ever signed. What she didn't know was that this perfect facade had cracks reaching far beyond the marriage, and soon even his company would start to feel them. At first glance, the mansion stood flawless. Stone facade, perfect hedges, a front porch large enough to host summer parties. But inside, she began to notice fractures no contractor could fix. A faint trace of perfume on his shirts not hers. Receipts from restaurants she'd never been to. Business trips that didn't match his calendar. When she asked, he smiled the way CEOs do when smoothing over shareholder doubts. You're overthinking. It's just work. Always just work. Her friends noticed before she did. At dinner parties, he'd be glued to his phone, half listening. When she laughed at a story, he didn't even look up. After one evening, her closest friend pulled her aside. You okay? He feels gone. She forced a smile. He's just under pressure. It was easier to protect the facade than admit the truth. Ironically, it was his idea to install the Ring camera. Security matters, he said, clicking through the app with pride. She never questioned it. But as the days wore on, she realized the device didn't just protect the house, it revealed the silence within it. Clips of her bringing in groceries alone, her waving at neighbors while he was absent, her tucking kids in while the door stayed locked empty. The house became a diary written in footage instead of words. She remembered the first time she felt truly unsettled. He came home late, shirt untucked, cologne sharp. When she reached for his hand, he pulled away too quickly. Stress, he said. Always stress. But in her chest, a new kind of stress bloomed suspicion. One Saturday, she asked if he'd join the kids at soccer. He barely looked up from his laptop. Can't. Quarterly review. The kids went quiet, faces falling. She covered quickly, Daddy's busy. We'll cheer louder for him. But inside, she felt the crack widen. He wasn't missing games. He was missing their lives. The Ring camera had already seen too much. It stored every unanswered knock, every delivery she dragged inside alone every night she went to bed before he came home. She didn't realize then that it was also waiting to record the moment her illusions finally collapsed. That night, as she scrolled through old footage, she stopped on a clip. Him at the door, speaking low into his phone face lit by the porch light. He wasn't smiling like a man exhausted. He was smiling like a man in love. And in that frozen frame, she knew whatever he was keeping from her, it had already crossed a line. What she didn't know was that the camera wasn't just about to reveal betrayal. It would capture the very evidence that could turn suspicion into a weapon in court. The clip started like any other. A notification buzzed, motion detected, 11:47 p.m. She tapped it absent-mindedly, expecting a package thief or the neighborhood stray cat. But instead, the door opened, and her whole world changed. He stepped into the porch light first. Tall, sharp suit tie loose around his neck. Her husband. Behind him, the figure she hadn't dared imagine, the assistant. Younger, dressed in a fitted dress, heels clicking softly on the stone. Her laugh drifted through the mic light, conspiratorial. She watched him glance over his shoulder as though checking for eyes. Then his hand slid to the small of the woman's back. Her body leaned in, familiar, practiced. And then the dagger. He pressed a finger to her lips. Quiet. No one has to know. But someone did know. The Ring camera and now his wife. Her stomach lurched. Her knees buckled. She clutched the counter to keep from falling. She replayed it again, praying for a glitch. But each time the truth grew sharper, crueler. The man she had loved for over a decade had walked another woman into their home like she belonged there. Her mind spun backward, to the night she stayed awake soothing their colicky baby while he prepared investor decks. To the time she pawned her grandmother's locket to cover bills when his first company collapsed. To the countless times she said, "Don't worry, I've got the house," while he chased meetings across time zones. She had built the foundation so he could build the empire, and this was the empire's reward. Her thoughts spiraled, sharp and endless. How long had this been going on? Was it only her, or were there others? Did the whole office know? Did the board, most terrifying of all? If she confronted him, would he even care? She wanted to call someone. Her best friend, her mother, anyone. But when she opened her phone, shame froze her fingers. How could she explain that her fairy tale marriage had always been fragile glass, now shattered in high definition? The footage wasn't just evidence of infidelity. It was evidence of humiliation. She sat there until dawn, the clip looping like a curse. The image of his hand on the assistant's back seared into her brain. The laugh, the gesture, the betrayal. And for the first time, she whispered the words she'd never dared before. Maybe I can't forgive this. What she didn't know was that this footage wasn't just proof of betrayal. It was the key that could unlock the prenup and change the balance of power forever. She waited until the kids were asleep. Dinner plates, rinsed backpacks lined up the house, quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. He walked in, late jacket slung over his shoulder, loosened tie, the faint smell of whiskey trailing him. "Rough day," he muttered, heading for the kitchen. But she didn't answer. Her phone was already in her hand, the clip queued up. "Look at this," she said flatly. He frowned, stepped closer. The screen lit the room in cold blue light, himself stepping into the porch glow, the assistant behind him, the laugh, the touch. His face drained, then hardened. "That's nothing. Her voice cracked. "You walked her into our home, at midnight, with your hand on her back." He exhaled sharply. "You're twisting this. She was dropping off paperwork. We had a deadline. Paperwork at midnight." "She lives close by." His voice sharpened. "You've been cooped up in this house too long. You don't understand how high stress my job is." Her chest heaved. "So high stress you have to sneak your assistant into our home when you think I'm asleep." For once, he had no ready answer. The silence stretched heavy and damning. She stood taller, surprising herself with the steadiness in her voice. "I gave up everything for you. My career, my independence. I raised our kids while you built your empire, and this is how you repay me." His jaw clenched. "Don't be dramatic. It was a mistake." "No," she said quietly. "This was a choice." Her mind flashed to the prenup, the lawyer's office years ago. How he'd insisted, how she'd felt humiliated signing it. How he'd promised, "You'll never need it. It's just business." Now, for the first time, she realized she was the one holding the leverage. He reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "Listen," he said quickly, tone softening. "I can fix this. We don't have to ruin everything over one slip." She stared at him, the man she no longer recognized. And in that moment, something inside her shifted. The fear that had kept her silent was replaced by clarity. "You already ruined it," she whispered. "I'm just deciding how to clean up the mess." He stiffened, realizing he wasn't talking to the same woman he'd controlled for years. Her eyes were steady now, unshaken. And though he didn't know it yet, she wasn't just holding a phone with footage. She was holding the keys to the prenup that could dismantle his kingdom. What he didn't know was that her next call wouldn't be to him, it would be to a lawyer. Word traveled fast, not because she told anyone, but because secrets this big never stay in one house for long. Her silence was a dam, but tiny cracks were already leaking. She broke first with her sister. Over coffee at the kitchen table, she slid the phone across. Her sister's gasp was sharp hands flying to her mouth. "Oh my God, he brought her here." The nod was enough. Tears burned in her throat, but she kept her voice calm. "Yes, in our home." While the kids were upstairs, her sister's eyes hardened. "You have to protect yourself. And the kids. Don't you dare sweep this under the rug." Telling her parents was worse. Her mother wept quietly, repeating, "How could he? After everything you gave him." Her father's jaw worked in silence, fists clenching the kind of fury men of his generation didn't show in words. When her father finally spoke, his voice shook. "You don't stay with a man who humiliates you in your own house. Do you understand?" She did. But knowing and acting were two different mountains to climb. Her closest friends were divided. One urged, "Think of the kids." Maybe counseling. Another snapped, "Counseling doesn't erase evidence." The debate swirled around her like a courtroom, everyone offering advice, no one carrying the weight but her. That night, as the voices echoed in her head, she pulled out the fireproof lockbox at the back of the closet. Inside, folded and forgotten, was the prenup. Her hands trembled as she unfolded the pages, scanning the clauses she once resented. And there it was, in black and white: infidelity triggers full asset protection for the spouse. Her breath caught. She wasn't trapped. She wasn't powerless. The document she had once seen as his shield was in fact her sword. She closed the lockbox, pressing her palms against the cool metal. For the first time in weeks, she slept soundly, because now she knew her next move. Not a dramatic fight, not a screaming match, but a phone call. A call to a lawyer who would help her rewrite the story she thought was over. Meanwhile, across town, he was bragging over drinks to colleagues that he'd smoothed things over. He had no idea that the woman he'd underestimated was already laying the groundwork to dismantle his empire piece by piece. What he didn't know was that by the time she made her next move, his company would be dragged into the fallout too, because HR was about to get involved. The lawyer's office smelled faintly of paper and polished wood. She sat across the desk, hands clenched, the prenup unfolded between them like a map leading out of prison. The attorney, a calm woman in her 50s, adjusted her glasses and scanned the pages. When she looked up, her expression was steady, almost approving. "You understand what this means?" she asked. Her throat tightened. "That I'm not stuck." The lawyer nodded. "You're not just not stuck, you're protected. If we can prove infidelity, this prenup guarantees you walk away with financial security, assets, custody leverage. Everything you feared losing the contract gives back to you." For the first time in weeks, her lungs filled with air that didn't choke. She slid her phone across. The ring footage played, blue light flickering across the lawyer's calm face. The woman didn't flinch. "This isn't just proof," she said. "This is irrefutable." Her hands shook. Irrefutable. A word heavy with finality and relief. But the lawyer wasn't the only one reviewing evidence. At his company, whispers were spreading. The assistant had grown careless, late-night texts, unexplained absences. An HR rep noticed patterns, flagged them. And when the footage surfaced in the right inbox, it wasn't just a scandal at home. It was a compliance nightmare. CEO, employee, affair. A breach of policy, a breach of trust, a headline waiting to happen. She remembered the day she signed the prenup. How humiliated she'd felt, a pen in hand, while he reassured, "It's just business, sweetheart. Nothing to worry about." She'd signed with tears in her eyes, feeling small, replaceable. Now she understood. That pen stroke had been her salvation. When the papers arrived, divorce filings, asset claims backed by the prenup, he laughed at first. She's bluffing. But then HR called him in. Compliance investigations. Board whispers. His laugh faltered. The empire he'd built wasn't untouchable, and she was the one shaking its foundation. At home, she poured herself coffee steady for the first time in years. The kids played in the yard, the sun warm on her face. For once, she wasn't waiting for his car in the driveway. She wasn't waiting for excuses. She was waiting for freedom. He stared at the documents, jaw tight, the world closing in. In the corner of his office, the assistant packed her things, her career collateral damage. And for the first time in his life, he realized something terrifying: she had been his foundation all along. And without her, the empire was crumbling. What neither of them knew was that the real battle wasn't money or property. It was who would walk away with dignity intact. He was in the middle of a board presentation when his assistant's seat sat empty for the first time. Whispers rippled down the long mahogany table. Every slide on the screen blurred as he caught the look in the chairwoman's eyes, icy, disappointed, calculating. The meeting ended abruptly. He was summoned to HR. The room was sterile, the blinds drawn. Across the table sat two HR managers and a compliance officer. On the screen between them, the ring footage played. His own voice echoed back at him. "Shh, no one has to know." But everyone knew now. The officer leaned forward, tone clipped. "Do you realize the liability this creates, a CEO involved with a subordinate?" A breach of policy, a breach of trust. His throat burned. He tried to argue deadlines, late-night stress, but the excuses sounded pathetic even to him. That evening, as he slumped into his leather chair at home, a knock came at the door. He opened it expecting silence. Instead, a courier handed him a thick envelope. Inside, divorce filings. Her name bold at the top, the prenup stapled behind like a silent witness. Infidelity clause invoked. Assets divided in her favor. Her lawyer's signature crisp and unflinching. He skimmed the pages, blood draining from his face. This wasn't a bluff. This was war. Meanwhile, she stood at her sister's house watching her children laugh in the yard. Her hands no longer shook. The papers had been served, the decision made. She had cried enough tears for both of them. Now came clarity. This wasn't just an ending, it was a release. She remembered the night she confronted him, how he tried to call her dramatic, paranoid, ungrateful, how he tried to shrink her into silence. But the footage had spoken louder than excuses, and the prenup had spoken louder than shame. Alone in the mansion, he stared at the footage again. Not because he doubted it, but because he couldn't believe he'd been stupid enough to let it happen in front of the very camera he installed. He thought he'd built walls too high to break, but the cracks had been there all along, and she was the one walking free through them. He held the papers, rage mixing with regret. And for the first time in his career and his life, he didn't know how to negotiate his way out. Because this wasn't a deal. This was a verdict. What he didn't know was that she wasn't just leaving him. She was about to redefine herself, entirely starting over on her own terms. The moving truck pulled away, leaving boxes stacked in the driveway of her new house. Not a mansion, not a showpiece, but hers. She stood on the porch, sunlight spilling across her face, the sound of her children laughing inside. For the first time in years, she wasn't waiting for footsteps at the door, excuses on the phone, or whispers in the dark. She was waiting for nothing, and that felt like freedom. Unpacking was messy, chaotic. The kids argued over bedrooms, she tripped over bubble wrap, and dinner was takeout on paper plates. But the laughter was real. The air felt lighter. She caught herself humming while folding towels, a small joy she thought she'd forgotten. In her mind, flashes of the old house returned. Marble counters, stainless steel appliances, every surface spotless. But the silence had been suffocating. The wealth had felt like a cage. This modest home, with its scuffed hardwood floors and 2 small closets, felt more alive than any square foot of that mansion ever did. That evening, she installed her own Ring camera. She smiled wryly as she tightened the screws, the device clicking into place. Once the camera had caught betrayal. Now it stood as her guardian, not of secrets, but of peace. She wasn't afraid of what it might see, because there was nothing left to hide. Across town, he sat alone in the cavernous mansion. The board had clipped his power, HR kept him on a short leash, and whispers followed him down every hallway. His assistant was gone. His reputation dented, his marriage dissolved. The empire was still standing, but hollow, fragile, no longer his alone. He watched old family videos late at night, kids running through the backyard, her laugh echoing. But ghosts don't come back when you call them. She didn't look back. The prenup had given her money, but her courage had given her something greater herself. At the school pickup line, another mom asked casually, "So, how are you holding up?" She smiled, genuine. "I'm not holding up. I'm starting over." That night, she scrolled through the Ring app on her phone. The camera showed the porch of her new home, quiet, safe, kids' bicycles leaning against the rail. No shadows sneaking through. No secrets hiding in the glow. Just life. Just hers. She closed the app, set the phone down, and whispered to herself, "This is my beginning."